When I was 12 years old, growing up in northern New Mexico, I had the opportunity to go explore some caves with my Girl Scout troop when I was in sixth grade. So going down into the darkness of these caves. And like most 12-year-olds, and most of us in general, but 12-year-olds, I was still afraid of the dark, afraid to admit that I was still afraid of the dark, right? Because that, when you're 6, you should be done with that. But climbing into that cave was something different. I was with a group of girls my age, and because we had that anxiety and that excitement, we giggled and spooked our ways through these caves. We heard echoes of our voice down those empty caves. And once we had walked for a bit and could no longer see the light from the entrance, our guide asked us to stop. She calmed us down, stopped giggling, stopped chatting, and she said she wanted us to turn off our lights and listen. Lights turned off. We were in a kind of darkness I had never experienced. I remember truly not being able to tell if my eyes were open or closed. It was such a confusing sensation. But once I kind of got past that and started to listen, I heard water trickling down the walls. I heard drips into puddles. I heard the wind pushing through the cracks of the cave and from above. I heard my own breath and the breath of the other girls around me. Our guide then asked us to turn our lights back on, and she said to us, "There's music down here." She went on to explain what life is like deep in these caves, how the dripping water is constantly changing the shape of the caves, how there's a whole world of little bugs and creatures who find their home down there, who have evolved to function in complete darkness. I wanted to become a spelunker because it sounded so cool, but also because the first time in my life, this guide had shown me that there is music and mystery in complete darkness. That creation has this amazing ability to adapt to its circumstances, like these little bugs who biologically changed to live in this darkness. In Advent, we are similarly invited, like that guide invited us, into darkness, to see, perceive, and move in this world differently. It's of course not a coincidence that our church decided to celebrate the birth of Jesus at this time of the year, that Advent would coincide with the darkest point of the year, that Christmas would come closely to the winter solstice and the growing of light again. I preached this exact same Sunday in December of 2010. And I don't know if you remember 2010, but it was a winter that feels a lot like this winter is starting to feel. Like the snow seems to just keep coming, the cold keeps getting colder. This was my first year living here in the Twin Cities, my first year dealing with what snow emergencies are like in St. Paul. And it was the year that the old Metrodome's roof collapsed. That actually happened on December 12th, so just 2 days earlier than today, 15 years ago. And as some of you remember, we were at our old location just up the road. We had church at night at that time, at 5 o'clock in the evening. And I got there around 4 o'clock that night, and I think me and Marty and Kathy were here, and maybe a handful of others, and within minutes of us getting there, the heaviness of the snow had knocked down some power lines somewhere in the neighborhood, and we were in darkness. But we were like, well, I guess we're here already. Like, we might as well just do church, right? So the handful of us that were here, do you guys remember that? Yeah. Were you there, Tom? Do you remember? Yeah. So the handful of us that were there had liturgy in darkness with flashlights and candles. And I remember everything feeling slower and more intentional. We had to figure out how to do things a little different. We had to navigate together in a different way. And we noticed very quickly how the church changed when there was no light or heat, as we were bundled up in our jackets and hats and heard the wind pushing through our windows. In darkness, we hear differently, we see differently, and we move differently. And we are certainly vulnerable in darkness. Our guard is up to a degree, even if we're in a safe place. Our animal bodies, especially in the cold, know, oh, we shouldn't be here. But somehow, darkness can also be a strange place of illumination. Because in darkness, that intentionality is required. And we can discover more fully who we are, who we're called to be in this moment, and we might start to hear some music that we didn't even know was playing in ourselves, in our neighbors, in creation, in God. And this morning, as we enter into that same darkness, we hear John the Baptist and his followers searching in darkness too. And throughout our Advent stories, we hear not only them, but the Pharisees and bystanders ask these questions that are really common to ask in darkness. Who are you? Are you Elijah? Are you a prophet? Who are you? John the Baptist and his followers say, who are you? Are you really him? Are you who we've been waiting for? And I imagine when we've experienced darkness in our own lives, we might find ourselves asking similar questions. Who are you, God? Why is this happening? What are you doing? Are you even really here? And these can be scary questions to ask, and we might not always feel like we have permission to ask. But our scriptures today and throughout our sacred readings are filled with people just like that, who questioned, who sought, who wondered. Mary and Joseph questioned. They wondered how they could be the chosen ones to bring the Messiah into the world. And I can only imagine the questions they had on that first dark night in a manger where there were animals and their newborn child. Had they already failed God, letting him be born in such a place? How would they make it through this time of uncertainty? We have the privilege to ask those questions too. God does not want us to hold those questions, to hide them, to feel like they mean we're not faithful. Because those questions are what it means to be human and actually what it means to be people of faith. Because God, all holy, all powerful, all knowing, the creator of the heavens and the earth, is also God, the infant, the child, the worker, the justice seeker, the lover who dies on a cross. And when we are amidst our deep questions of where God is in the midst of our lives, Jesus says these words of Isaiah to us and to John the Baptist. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have good news brought to them. This was Jesus' answer to John the Baptist when John asked, are you the one we should be waiting for? Jesus never gives us a yes or no. Rather, he always gives us a word and an action. He points us to the direction of God and God's kingdom, a place where the blind see and the injured walk, where the homeless are clothed and the deaf hear and the dead live again. Jesus points us to a place where abundant flowers bloom in the desert. Moreover, he tells us that that is our place and that we know how to go there. When God speaks of the blind and the deaf and the injured in Scripture, he's not speaking about people with specific physical disabilities. He's speaking about the people of that time that were considered the outcasts, the people shunned by community, those considered unclean, those who are ousted into the darkness. As we live through this point in time in our history, we have members even in our own Twin Cities community, immigrants and refugees, even US-born citizens who might wear a hijab or whose primary language is Spanish, that are living in fear, pushed into darkness by xenophobia, recklessness, and cowardness. And if we want to find Jesus this Advent season or ever at all, we only need to go to these places, to the mosque in Burnsville, to the Cedar Riverside neighborhood, to the bus stop at Lake in Chicago, because there we will find Jesus in neighbors who stand witness, by community organizers who train, by business people who refuse to open their doors without warrants, and volunteers who deliver food to those who are afraid to leave their homes. This is a darkness none of us would choose. And as how quaint and peaceful Jesus in the manger is often depicted, I imagine that first night as a new mom was a dark and scary place for Mary. She did not want to birth her child in a dirty manger, turned away from every other shelter. But somehow, that is where God chose to be. And as unlikely and unbelievable as it is, there is much to be found in these dark spaces. Music that is all too often drowned out by our busyness and preoccupation. I invite us this week of Advent to try to find some time to sit in darkness. Maybe in the evening with just your Advent candles lit or your Christmas tree lit. Be still for long enough to let your body adjust. Listen. Take note of what you hear. And then when you are out in the world, navigating this current darkness we are in, listen to how God is calling you in this moment. Hold on to the powerful truth that there is so much to be discovered in darkness. Keep that music in your heart and move with intention. And know that you are never alone in the darkness, that always and forever God stands beside us, journeys with us, points us to God's kingdom, where healing and justice and restoration flow, and where desert flowers bloom, where freedom, peace, and love dwell.